Please don't turn off the doorbell, sir. My mommy said someone would listen. The voice was small, almost lost beneath the cold night air. But the words stopped Alessandro Moretti before he reached the front steps of his own mansion. It was 2:17 in the morning, and the billionaire who was feared in boardrooms and respected across the city had just returned from a meeting that lasted longer than expected. He expected silence. He expected the familiar glow of his marble entrance, the quiet footsteps of his security team, and the controlled perfection of a home where every detail had a place. He did not expect to see a little girl sitting alone on the stone porch. She was only 5 years old. Her small coat was too thin for the chilly night. Her knees were pulled close to her chest, and her tiny hands were wrapped around a worn stuffed bear with one missing button eye. Beside her, the blue light of the doorbell camera blinked again and again. She had been waiting there for hours. Alessandro stopped at the bottom of the steps. For a moment he said nothing. The scene did not make sense. His mansion had cameras, guards, staff, and locked gates. A child should never have been sitting outside his front door unnoticed. The little girl looked up at him. Her eyes were tired, but she was not crying. That was the first thing Alessandro noticed. She was not begging. She was not asking for money. She was not reaching for his expensive coat or trying to explain herself. She simply looked relieved that someone had finally arrived. "What is your name?" Alessandro asked. The girl slowly stood up, holding her stuffed bear against her chest. "Mia," she whispered. "Mia Johnson." Alessandro looked toward the entrance. Before he could ask another question, the front door opened behind him. Victoria Sinclair stepped out wearing an elegant coat, her expression filled with concern that appeared perfectly timed. "Alessandro, thank goodness you're home," she said. "I was afraid this would happen." He turned toward her. Victoria walked closer, keeping her voice calm. "That child is the daughter of Elena Johnson. She was one of our employees. Elena was dismissed earlier today because of a serious issue, and I believe the girl was brought here to create a scene." Alessandro looked back at Mia. The explanation sounded complete. Too complete. Mia did not interrupt. She only lowered her eyes and gently touched the silver bracelet around her wrist. "Where is your mother?" Alessandro asked. Mia looked toward the closed front door. "She said she would come back for me." "When?" he asked. The girl looked at the doorbell camera. "After she gave them the papers." Something changed in Alessandro's expression. "What papers?" Mia hugged her stuffed bear tighter. "The ones that made them angry," Victoria answered too quickly. "Children misunderstand adult conversations." Alessandro noticed the speed of her response. He noticed the way her fingers tightened around her coat sleeve. Small details. Details most people ignored. Details that had kept him alive in a world where trust was expensive. He looked at the camera above the door. The blue light continued blinking. "How long has she been outside?" he asked. "Victoria paused. "I'm not sure." Alessandro turned toward the security monitor near the entrance. A guard quickly checked the system. The screen showed the porch camera timeline. A small figure appeared. Mia sitting beside the door. Then another hour passed. Then another. She never left. She never wandered away. She never tried to enter. She simply waited. 4 hours and 36 minutes. Alessandro stared at the screen. A child had spent nearly an entire night outside his home, and everyone inside had chosen not to notice. Mia looked up at him and spoke quietly. "Mommy said not everyone with a big house has a big heart." The sentence was not angry. It was not dramatic. It was just something a child had remembered. Alessandro looked at Victoria. For the first time that night, he did not see a problem to solve. He saw a question. A very dangerous question. Why had the person closest to him allowed a 5-year-old girl to sit outside his door for 4 hours and 36 minutes? And why did Victoria look more afraid of Mia being heard than Mia being left alone? Victoria Sinclair did not look away from Alessandro Moretti. Her expression remained calm, almost gentle, the same expression she wore at charity events and business dinners when everyone was watching. "Alessandro," she said softly, "I understand why you are concerned, But you need to be careful. Children can repeat things they hear without understanding what they mean. Alessandro watched her carefully. Years of negotiation had taught him something simple. The most important words were not always the ones people said. They were the ones they rushed to explain. He looked back at Mia. The little girl was still standing near the porch, holding her old stuffed bear. She was not looking at Victoria. She was looking at the floor, as if she had already learned that adults often decided things before hearing the truth. "Where is Elena now?" Alessandro asked. Victoria answered immediately. "She left after we dismissed her. I do not know where she went." Again, the answer came too quickly. Alessandro noticed it. "Dismissed her for what reason?" he asked. Victoria folded her hands together. "For taking something that did not belong to her." The words changed the atmosphere inside the entrance hall. The guards looked away. The house staff became quiet. A simple accusation had been enough to turn a person into a suspect. Alessandro turned toward Mia. "Did your mother take something?" Mia shook her head slowly. "No, sir." "Are you sure?" he asked. The little girl looked down at her bracelet. "Mommy said people would believe the paper before they believed her." Alessandro looked at the silver bracelet again. It was old. The metal was scratched. To anyone else, it looked like a cheap piece of jewelry that belonged in a drawer. But Mia held it like it was the most important thing she owned. "Where did you get that?" Alessandro asked. Mia touched the bracelet carefully. "Mommy gave it to me today." Victoria stepped forward. "Alessandro, this is exactly why emotions can be dangerous. Elena may have told the child a story because she knew she was in trouble." Alessandro did not respond. Instead, he walked toward the security desk and asked for the employee records. A few minutes later, a file appeared on the screen.
Elena Johnson.
Housekeeping staff. For years of employment. No previous complaints.
No warnings.
No disciplinary records. Alessandro stared at the information. "For years," he said quietly. "And suddenly she steals something?" Victoria remained composed. "People make mistakes." Alessandro looked at her. "They do. But mistakes usually leave a pattern." Mia quietly spoke from behind him. "Mommy always cleaned the blue room last." Alessandro turned around. "Why is that important?" Mia looked toward the hallway. "Because she said that room had old things nobody looked at anymore." Victoria's face changed for only a second. Tiny movement. A small pause. But Alessandro saw it. "What old things?" he asked. Mia did not answer immediately. She was 5 years old. She did not know the entire story. She only knew pieces. "Pictures," she whispered. "And a box." Alessandro glanced toward the second floor. The blue room was a room most employees rarely entered. It belonged to the old Moretti family archives. Victoria noticed where he was looking. "That room has nothing to do with this." Alessandro turned back to her. "I did not say it did." Silence filled the entrance hall. It was the first moment Victoria realized she had revealed something she should not have known. Alessandro did not accuse her. He did not raise his voice. He simply stored the information away. That was what made him dangerous. He collected details before making decisions. He walked back to Mia and lowered himself so they were at the same height. "Mia, I need to ask you something. Did your mother tell you to come here tonight?" Mia shook her head. "No." "Then why did you stay?" The little girl looked at the doorbell camera. "Because Mommy said if something went wrong, I should wait where the house could see me." Alessandro looked at the camera again. A child had not chosen a random place to sit. She had chosen the one place where there would be proof she was there. For the first time, Alessandro wondered if Elena had not sent her daughter to make a scene. Maybe she had sent her daughter because she knew nobody would listen unless someone was forced to look. He turned to the security monitor and requested the full entrance records from that evening. Victoria's expression tightened. "Alessandro, is this really necessary?" He looked at the screen, then at the woman standing beside him. "I do not know yet." He paused. "That is why I need to see." Moments later, the security system loaded a list of access entries. One detail appeared on the screen. Elena Johnson's dismissal record had been created before Alessandro had even arrived home, before he had heard the accusation, before anyone had officially spoken to him. Alessandro stared at the timestamp. His face remained calm, but something inside him had shifted. Someone had already decided the story before he ever came home, and now he needed to find out who had written it. The timestamp on the screen stayed there, impossible to ignore. Elena Johnson's dismissal record had been created before Alessandro Moretti had even arrived home, before he had heard the accusation, before anyone had asked him for approval. Alessandro stared at the monitor without speaking. In his world, timing was everything. A contract signed 1 minute too early could change a company. A message sent at the wrong moment could reveal a hidden plan. And now, a simple employee record had exposed something far more personal. Someone had already decided the truth before he was allowed to see it. Who entered this record? Alessandro asked. The security employee standing near the desk quickly checked the system. The entry came from the household administration account, sir. Alessandro looked toward the hallway where Victoria Sinclair was standing. She remained calm, but her silence lasted just a little too long. The household administration account belongs to the manager, she said. That does not mean I personally entered anything. Alessandro nodded once. He did not argue. He did not accuse. He simply remembered. That was how he operated. Facts first, conclusions later. He turned back to the screen. Show me every access log from tonight. The employee hesitated. Sir, those records are usually private. Alessandro looked at him. Not tonight. A few seconds later, another file appeared. The screen showed several entries. The dismissal record, the employee notes, the approval section. Then, Alessandro noticed something unusual. The approval signature was not only copied. The digital location attached to it came from a room where he had not been all evening. The blue room, the same room Mia had mentioned. The room filled with old Moretti family records. Alessandro slowly looked toward the staircase. Mia was still standing near the entrance, holding her stuffed bear. She watched the adults move around her, but she did not interrupt. She was not trying to win anyone over. She was simply waiting. Alessandro walked toward her. Mia, he said gently. You said your mother cleaned the blue room. Mia nodded. Yes, sir. Did she tell you why? The little girl thought carefully. She said some things were forgotten because people wanted them forgotten. Alessandro looked at the silver bracelet around her wrist. Did your mother give you this before she left? Mia nodded again. She said if she could not explain everything, this would explain something. Victoria stepped forward. Alessandro, this is becoming unnecessary. A child should not be involved in household matters. Alessandro turned toward her. I agree. He paused. Which is why I want to know why she was involved at all. The room became quiet. Even the staff members who had been avoiding eye contact looked up. Alessandro asked the security employee to retrieve footage from the blue room. The employee searched, then stopped. Sir, the footage is missing. Alessandro's expression changed slightly. Missing? Yes, the camera recording from that hallway has a gap. How long? 8 minutes. 8 minutes. The same amount of time that could hide a conversation, a document, or a decision. Alessandro looked at Mia again. Did you see anyone in that room? Mia lowered her eyes. She was quiet for several seconds. Then she nodded. A lady. Victoria's voice became softer. Mia, many people work here. You may be confused. Mia shook her head. Not her clothes. Everyone became still. The little girl touched her bracelet. Her perfume. Alessandro noticed Victoria's hand stop moving. Just for a moment. Mia continued. Mommy said I should remember smells because people can change clothes, but they cannot change everything. Alessandro did not react outwardly, but the detail stayed with him. A 5-year-old child was not giving a perfect explanation. She was giving the only evidence she had. A memory. A small observation. Something an adult might ignore. Alessandro looked at the security footage again. The missing 8 minutes were no longer a technical problem. They were a choice. Someone had chosen to remove part of the story. He turned to the security team. Recover the deleted footage. Sir, that may take time. Alessandro looked toward the blue room. Then take the time. As he walked away, Mia quietly followed a few steps behind. She stopped near the stairs and looked at the dark hallway leading to the upper floor. Sir. Alessandro turned. Yes. Mia pointed toward the blue room. That is where Mommy cried.
Alessandro froze.
Not because of the words, because of what came next. She was not crying because she was scared. Mia held her bracelet tightly. She was crying because she thought nobody would believe her. For the first time that night, Alessandro felt the weight of a question he could not ignore. Not who had accused Elena, not who had changed the records, but how many people inside his own house had learned to stay silent. And why had a 5-year-old girl been the only one brave enough to wait outside until someone finally looked? The blue room had been closed for almost 3 years. Alessandro Moretti knew because he was the one who ordered the lock to remain untouched after his father passed away. It was not a place people entered casually. It held old family records, forgotten documents, and memories that most of the household preferred not to discuss. Now, a 5-year-old girl who had spent the night outside his door had pointed directly toward it. Alessandro stood in front of the room with 2 security employees behind him and Mia quietly holding her stuffed bear a few feet away. He unlocked the door himself. The room was exactly as he remembered. Old shelves covered the walls. A wooden desk sat beneath a layer of dust. Framed photographs rested in boxes that had not been opened for years. Nothing looked disturbed at first, but Alessandro had learned long ago that the most important things were often hidden inside what appeared normal. He walked slowly through the room. Then he noticed something. One folder on the shelf was not covered with dust. Someone had moved it recently. He pulled it out. Inside were old employee records, family notes, and archived documents. Most of them were ordinary. Then he found a thin envelope with no label. Before he opened it, Victoria appeared at the doorway. Alessandro, I really think this has gone too far, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes moved toward the envelope in his hand. You are letting a child's imagination create suspicion inside your own home. Alessandro looked at her. A child's imagination did not change an employee record before I arrived. Victoria remained silent for a moment. Then she smiled slightly. You are tired. You have had a long night. Alessandro did not answer. He opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of a household agreement from years earlier. At the bottom was a signature from his father. The name written there was Elena Johnson. Alessandro frowned. Elena had never mentioned having any connection to his family before working at the mansion. He looked closer. The document was not an employment contract. It was a promise. A promise that any employee who protected the Moretti family would always be heard before being judged. Alessandro read the words twice. His father had created the agreement after an incident years ago involving a staff member who had been blamed unfairly. The same pattern. The same mistake. Someone powerful made an accusation. Someone without power lost everything. Alessandro closed the document slowly. Behind him, Mia walked closer. She did not touch anything. She only looked at the paper. That is what Mommy found, she said. Alessandro turned. Your mother found this? Mia nodded. She said the house forgot its promise. The sentence stayed in the room. A small child had described something the adults had avoided saying for years. Alessandro looked back at Victoria. How did Elena know about this room? Victoria answered quickly. Everyone who works here knows old records exist. Again, too. Quick. Again, the same pattern. Alessandro noticed another detail. Victoria was not asking what the document said. She was asking why Elena knew about it. That was the question of someone who already understood the danger. Alessandro placed the document on the desk. I want the access history for this room. One of the security employees checked the system. A few seconds later, he looked uncomfortable. Sir, there is a problem. What problem? The room access records were manually adjusted yesterday. Alessandro looked up. By whom? The employee hesitated. The household administration account. The same account that created Elena's dismissal record. The same account connected to the missing camera footage. The pieces were no longer separate. They were beginning to form a picture. Alessandro turned toward Mia. Did your mother tell you anything else? Mia thought carefully. She said not to be angry before knowing everything. Alessandro was surprised. Most adults around him reacted with fear, anger, or self-interest. This child had remembered patience. He looked at the old agreement again. His father's words stared back at him. Listen before you judge. For years, Alessandro had believed power meant making decisions quickly. Tonight, he was learning something different. Sometimes power meant slowing down long enough to hear the person everyone else ignored. Then the security employee received a notification. He checked the screen and his expression changed. Sir, we found the deleted camera footage. Alessandro turned immediately. Play it. The employee connected the file. The screen loaded. The missing 8 minutes appeared. At first, there was only the hallway outside the blue room. Then Victoria walked into view. She was carrying a folder that looked exactly like the one Elena had supposedly stolen. Alessandro watched without moving. Mia stood beside him, holding her bear tightly. And for the first time, Victoria's perfect story began to fall apart. The video on the screen continued playing, and nobody inside the blue room moved. For 8 seconds, nothing happened. Then Victoria Sinclair stepped into view carrying a folder in her hand. She looked around the empty hallway before entering the room.
Alessandro Moretti watched closely.
He did not blink. He did not speak. The woman standing beside him moments earlier had claimed she barely knew what happened inside this room. But the camera showed something different. Victoria had been there, alone, holding the same type of folder that was later connected to Elena Johnson's dismissal. The security employee paused the recording. Sir, should I continue? Alessandro looked at the screen. Continue. The video played again. Victoria placed the folder on the desk. She opened one of the old drawers. Then she removed a document and replaced it with another paper. The image was not perfect. The camera angle did not show every word. But it showed enough. Someone had entered the blue room before Elena was accused. Someone had handled the records before the accusation was made. Alessandro finally spoke. Zoom in. The employee enlarged the image. The document became clearer. At the top was the employee review section. At the bottom was a signature. Not Alessandro's real signature. A copy. A false approval. The room became silent. Mia stood near the doorway, still holding Button the stuffed bear. She looked at the screen but did not celebrate. She did not smile because someone was proven wrong. She only whispered, Mommy told the truth. Alessandro heard those words, and they affected him more than the footage itself. Because Mia had never asked him to punish anyone. She had never asked for money. She had never asked for the mansion. She only wanted someone to believe her mother. Alessandro looked at Victoria. You said Elena stole from this house. Victoria kept her posture steady. I said there was evidence suggesting that. Evidence created after you entered this room. Victoria's expression changed slightly. You are making assumptions.
Alessandro nodded. No.
I am making observations. That was the difference. He was not reacting emotionally. He was following the facts.
Victoria stepped closer.
Alessandro, you are letting one mistake destroy trust between us. Alessandro looked at the screen again. Trust is not destroyed by questions. It is destroyed when someone creates a reason not to ask them. The security employee continued reviewing the footage. Then another detail appeared. The camera showed Victoria leaving the blue room and walking directly toward the household office. Minutes later, the employee dismissal record was created. The timeline connected, but Alessandro still needed more. One piece of evidence was not enough. A person could explain a mistake. A person could explain a misunderstanding. But a pattern was harder to explain. Find every change made to Elena Johnson's file, Alessandro ordered. The employee searched through the system. Several entries appeared. A complaint added 3 months earlier. A warning added 2 months earlier. A note about suspicious behavior added just days before her dismissal. Alessandro studied each one. Elena had worked in the house for 4 years without a single problem. Then suddenly, several negative reports appeared within a short period of time. It was not one accusation. It was a story being built. A story designed to make people stop asking questions.
Mia quietly walked toward Alessandro.
She looked at the screen showing her mother's records. They wanted everyone to think Mommy was bad. Alessandro looked down at her. Why do you think that? Mia touched the silver bracelet on her wrist. Because when people believe something bad, they stop listening. The sentence stayed with him. A 5-year-old child had described exactly how the system worked. Accusations moved faster than truth. Alessandro turned back to the records. I want an independent review of every complaint against Elena. Victoria immediately responded. That is unnecessary. Alessandro looked at her. That is exactly what someone would say if they wanted it to remain unnecessary. For the first time, Victoria had no immediate answer.
Alessandro noticed.
The perfect confidence was gone for only a moment. But that moment was enough. The investigation was no longer about one employee. It was about whether his own house had been protecting the wrong people. As the security team continued digging, another notification appeared on the screen. A hidden audio file had been found inside Elena's old employee phone backup. The file name was simple. One word. Promise. Alessandro stared at it. Mia looked at the screen. And somewhere inside that small file was the answer to the question that had started everything. Why had Elena trusted a 5-year-old child to wait outside the door instead of trusting the adults inside? The hidden audio file sat on the computer screen with one simple name. Promise. Alessandro Moretti looked at it for several seconds before pressing play. The room became completely quiet. Even Victoria Sinclair stopped speaking. The recording began with a soft background sound, the kind of noise that came from an ordinary day inside a large home. Then Elena Johnson's voice appeared. She sounded tired, but calm. If something happens and nobody believes me, I need someone to know why. Alessandro looked down. He recognized that tone. It was not the voice of someone trying to create trouble. It was the voice of someone who had already realized nobody wanted to hear the truth. The recording continued. Elena explained that she had found unusual changes in household documents. She did not accuse anyone immediately. She said she wanted to understand first. She mentioned missing records, altered schedules, and old family files that had been moved without permission. Then she mentioned the blue room. I found the old agreement from Mr. Moretti's father, Elena said in the recording. The one about listening before judging. Alessandro closed his eyes for a moment. Those words were not just a sentence. They were part of his family history. A principle his father had written down, but that many people inside the house had forgotten. The recording continued. Elena said she believed someone was trying to make certain employees look unreliable so nobody would question decisions made by the household administration. She did not know who was responsible. She only knew the pattern. They do not need everyone to believe a lie, Elena said. They only need everyone to stop asking questions. Alessandro looked at Mia. The little girl was sitting quietly in a chair near the doorway, holding Button in her lap. She was listening, but she did not fully understand every word. She only understood one thing. Her mother was telling the truth. The recording ended with Elena saying one final sentence. If Mia ever has to wait outside that house, please remember she is not waiting for money. She is waiting for someone to open the door. Nobody spoke after the audio ended. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Alessandro slowly looked at Victoria. You knew she found something. Victoria shook her head.
No.
I knew Elena was confused. Alessandro looked at the screen. Then why did she record this? Victoria did not answer immediately. Another small pause. Another detail. Alessandro noticed every one. He asked the security employee to search the employee phone backup connected to Elena's account. More files appeared. Notes, photos, dates. One image caught Alessandro's attention. It showed a stack of household documents on a desk. In the corner of the image was a small part of a folder label. Moretti Foundation Staff Review. Alessandro recognized it. The foundation was one of his family's largest charitable programs. It was supposed to protect employees and support families in need, not create fear. How long has this been happening? Alessandro asked. The employee searched deeper. At least 18 months, sir. 18 months. The problem was bigger than Elena. Bigger than one false accusation. Someone had been quietly changing how the house operated. Alessandro walked to the window overlooking the porch where Mia had waited earlier that night. A child had sat there for hours because the adults inside had decided her mother's voice did not matter. He finally understood the deeper truth. Victoria had not simply removed Elena from the house. She had created an environment where people learned that speaking up was dangerous for their position. But Alessandro also understood something else. He could not fix this by simply removing one person. If the system allowed the problem to grow, another person would eventually do the same thing. He turned back toward the room. I want a full independent review of the household administration records for the last 2 years. Victoria's expression changed. Alessandro, that could damage the reputation of this family. He looked at her calmly. The truth does not damage a reputation. The truth reveals what was already there. Mia looked up at him. It was the first time she saw him not as a man with a large house, but as someone who was finally listening. Then Alessandro's phone received a message from the investigation team. A new discovery had been made. A document had been found connected to Elena's dismissal. A document with a signature that was supposed to prove everything. But there was one problem. The signature was not Alessandro's. And the person who created it had made one mistake they never expected anyone to notice. The signature on the document looked almost perfect. Almost. Alessandro Moretti had spent decades studying agreements, contracts, and records. He knew that the smallest mistake could reveal the biggest truth. The document in front of him carried his name, his authority, and the appearance of a final decision. But there was one detail that did not belong. The signature was missing the small mark he always added at the end. A habit nobody outside his closest circle knew about. A habit his father had taught him. Alessandro placed the document on the table and looked at the investigation report beside it. This was created to look like my decision, he said quietly. But it was never mine. The room remained silent. Victoria Sinclair stood near the fireplace, watching him carefully. She did not panic. She did not argue. She simply adjusted her expression and prepared another explanation. That was what made Alessandro more cautious. People who were innocent usually wanted the truth to be found. People protecting something wanted the conversation to end. Someone could have copied your signature, Victoria said. That does not prove I had anything to do with it.
Alessandro nodded.
You are right. Victoria looked slightly surprised. Then you understand. No, he replied calmly. I understand that one piece of evidence is not enough. That was the difference between suspicion and proof. Alessandro had not reached a conclusion. He was building one. He ordered a complete review of the household administration system. Every employee record, every access change, every document approval, every private instruction created under his name. While the team worked, Alessandro walked back toward the porch where Mia had waited earlier. The stone steps were empty now, but he could still picture the small child sitting there for hours. He wondered how many people inside his house had seen her and decided she was not important enough to notice. Mia was sitting in the nearby sitting room with Elena's old bracelet in her hands. She was quiet. Are you tired? Alessandro asked. Mia looked up and nodded slightly. A little. Why did you stay outside for so long? He asked. Mia looked at the bracelet. Because Mommy said leaving too early means people can say nobody was there. Alessandro sat across from her. That answer stayed with him. Mia was not trying to defeat anyone. She was not trying to expose a powerful person. She was simply following the instructions of a mother who knew the world often ignored people without status. Then the investigation team returned with new information. The household administration system had been changed several times over the past year. Different employee records had been edited. Complaints had appeared after private disagreements. Positive reviews had disappeared. It was not one mistake. It was a pattern. Alessandro looked through the list of affected employees. Most were people who had worked in lower positions. Housekeepers, drivers, kitchen staff, people whose voices rarely reached his office. Victoria had not created a single lie. She had created a system where certain people became easier to blame. Alessandro finally understood the bigger truth. The problem was not only that Elena was accused unfairly. The problem was that everyone around her had learned silence was safer than honesty. He called the head of security. "I need everyone who changed these records identified." The security director hesitated. "Sir, some of these changes were approved by senior household management." Alessandro looked at him. "Then we investigate senior household management." The decision was made. He was no longer protecting the appearance of the Moretti name. He was protecting what the name was supposed to represent. Later that evening, Victoria entered his office. For the first time, she looked less confident. "Are you really going to expose this?" she asked. Alessandro looked at the documents spread across his desk. "If I hide it, then I become part of it." Victoria lowered her voice. "You know what happens when powerful families admit mistakes. People use it against them." Alessandro looked at her. Then maybe powerful families should stop making people pay for their mistakes. She had no answer. After she left, Alessandro noticed one more file from the investigation. It was a handwritten note from Elena found inside the old phone backup. It was not an accusation. It was a question. Who will listen when the person who needs help is the person nobody sees? Alessandro looked toward the hallway where Mia was sleeping safely inside the house for the first time in hours. The answer was clear now. He would listen. But before he could act, the investigation team discovered something else. A meeting had been scheduled for the next morning. Victoria had planned to present her own version of events before Alessandro could reveal the truth. She still believed she controlled the story. She did not know Alessandro had already decided to bring the entire house into the room where the truth could no longer be ignored. The next morning, the Moretti mansion looked exactly the same from the outside. The tall gates were closed. The gardens were perfectly maintained. The marble floors inside still reflected the soft morning light. But something had changed. For the first time in years, the people inside the house did not know what Alessandro Moretti was going to do. The family meeting began at 9 o'clock in the main hall. The same hall where employees usually stood quietly while decisions were made above them. Victoria Sinclair arrived early. She wore a professional smile and carried a folder of documents. To anyone watching, she looked prepared, calm, and confident. She believed she was still controlling the story. Alessandro entered a few minutes later. Beside him was not a lawyer, not a business partner, not a powerful family member. It was Mia Johnson, holding her stuffed bear and walking beside Elena. The room became quiet. Victoria looked surprised for only a second before returning to her calm expression. "Alessandro, I do not think this is appropriate," she said. "This is a private family matter." Alessandro looked around the room.
No.
It became a household matter the moment someone used this house to silence people. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were the investigation results. The first document showed Elena's dismissal record. The second showed the false approval. The third showed the altered employee reports. Then Alessandro placed the final piece of evidence in front of everyone. The audio recording from Elena's old phone. Nobody spoke as Elena's voice filled the room again. She explained how employees were afraid to report problems because complaints disappeared and records changed. She never accused anyone without proof. She only documented what she saw. When the recording ended, Alessandro looked toward the household staff. "How many of you noticed something was wrong?" First, nobody answered. Then one employee slowly raised a hand. Then another. A driver spoke about a schedule change he never requested. A kitchen employee explained that a positive review disappeared after questioning a decision. A housekeeper admitted she stayed quiet because she believed nobody would listen. The truth was not one person's mistake. It was a system that taught people their voices did not matter. Victoria remained composed. "You are allowing fear to create a false story," she said. "People are saying things now because they think they are protected." Alessandro looked at her.
No.
"They are speaking because they finally are." Then he turned toward the security team. "Show them the camera footage." The screen displayed the missing hallway recording from the blue room.
Victoria entering.
Victoria handling the documents. Victoria leaving before Elena was accused. Nobody needed an explanation anymore. The timeline spoke for itself. Victoria's expression changed. Not dramatically, not like someone in a movie, just a small moment where the confidence disappeared.
Alessandro noticed.
Everyone noticed. "You built this around one assumption," Alessandro said, "that people without power would never be believed." Victoria looked at Mia. "And you are trusting a child?" The room became still. Alessandro did not raise his voice. "I am trusting evidence." He paused. "The child only showed us where to look." Mia looked down at her bracelet. She did not understand every detail of the conversation. She only understood that her mother was finally being heard. Alessandro turned to Elena. "I owe you an apology." Elena looked at him quietly. "An apology does not erase what happened."
Alessandro nodded.
"You are right." The answer surprised everyone. He did not defend himself. He did not explain. "That is why this will not end with words." He announced that every household employee record would be reviewed by an independent team. Any false report would be removed. Any employee harmed by the system would receive proper support and restoration of their position. Victoria finally understood. Alessandro was not trying to win an argument. He was changing the structure that allowed the problem to happen. The decision had consequences. Her access to household administration was removed immediately while the review continued. The staff who had followed unfair instructions were required to cooperate with the investigation. Nobody was publicly humiliated. Nobody was punished without proof. The truth was handled the same way it should have been from the beginning, with evidence. As the meeting ended, Mia walked toward the large front doors. She stopped for a moment and looked outside at the porch where she had waited the night before.
Alessandro noticed.
"What are you thinking about?" he asked. Mia looked back at him. The door worked better today. Alessandro looked at the doorway. A simple sentence from a child. But it carried everything that had changed. Then Elena received a message from the investigation team. There was one final document they had not yet reviewed. A document connected to the original reason Elena discovered the hidden records. And when Alessandro opened it, he realized the problem inside his house was connected to a decision made long before Victoria ever entered. The final document arrived just after the meeting ended. It was not another accusation. It was not another complaint. It was something much older. Alessandro Moretti sat alone in his office with the folder open in front of him. Elena Johnson stood near the doorway, while Mia sat on the sofa with Button the stuffed bear resting in her lap. The room was quiet. Everyone had already seen the truth about Victoria Sinclair. But Alessandro knew there was still one unanswered question. Why had Elena discovered these records in the first place? He opened the document carefully. Inside was an old internal review from years earlier. It was dated before Victoria joined the Moretti family, before the current household structure existed. The report described a problem his father had noticed long ago. Employees without power were being ignored when they raised concerns. His father had created the listening agreement because he believed a strong family was not measured by how many people obeyed them. It was measured by how many people felt safe telling them the truth. Alessandro read the final note written by his father. A house can be protected by walls, cameras, and guards, but a family is protected by the people inside it. He stared at the words. For years, he had protected the walls, the cameras, the reputation. But he had forgotten the people.
Elena stepped closer.
I found that report because I was looking for the reason the old policies changed, she said. I thought someone had made a mistake. Alessandro looked at her. And then, Elena looked down. Then I realized it was not a mistake. People had slowly changed the rules until nobody felt comfortable speaking.
Alessandro understood.
Victoria had not created the weakness in the system. She had found a weakness that was already there and used it. The problem was not one person. The problem was a culture of silence. A week later, the independent review was completed. The results confirmed what Alessandro already suspected. Several employee records had been unfairly altered. Some complaints were unsupported. Some positive evaluations had disappeared. The review did not only restore Elena's name, it restored the names of everyone who had been ignored. Employees who had stayed silent for years were finally heard through a proper process. Those who had followed unfair instructions were removed from decision-making roles. Those who had been harmed received formal corrections to their records. There were no dramatic speeches, no public humiliation,
no shortcuts,
just accountability based on evidence. Victoria Sinclair was removed from all household management responsibilities and faced a formal review of her actions. Her influence disappeared not because Alessandro used his power against her, but because the evidence no longer supported her position. The same system she had trusted to protect her had finally been used to reveal the truth. Months later, the Moretti mansion felt different. The staff no longer avoided conversations when Alessandro entered a room. Employees understood that questions were allowed. Concerns could be reported. Rules existed to protect people, not silence them. One evening, Alessandro found Mia sitting near the front entrance drawing on a piece of paper. He looked down and saw a picture of the mansion. But something was different. In the drawing, the front door was open. "What are you making?" Alessandro asked. Mia looked up. "A house where people come inside." Alessandro smiled slightly. "I like that." She pointed at the drawing. Before, the door was closed. Alessandro looked at the picture for a long moment. He knew exactly what she meant. The door had never only been a physical door. It represented who was welcomed, who was ignored, and who was expected to wait outside. He sat beside her. "Mia, I need to tell you something." She looked at him. "What?" "Your mother was right to protect the truth. And you were right to wait until someone listened." Mia smiled. "Mommy said waiting is easier when you know someone will come." Alessandro looked toward the front porch. The place where a 5-year-old girl had spent a cold night believing that someone inside would eventually hear her. He understood something he had missed for years. Power was not the ability to make people open doors for you. Real power was having the courage to open doors for people who had been ignored. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. Alessandro walked toward it. This time, Mia was not outside. She was beside him. He opened the door before the person on the other side could press the button again. And for the first time, the sound of the doorbell did not mean someone was waiting to be accepted. It meant someone was already welcome.